Marcus Kim pulled his car into the parking lot of Burger Crown just as the sun was setting. The neon sign above the restaurant glowed bright red against the darkening sky. He checked his watch. It was 8:45 in the evening. He had exactly 15 minutes before the place closed for the night. Marcus was tired. He had spent the entire day visiting different restaurants across the city. His back ached from sitting in the car for so many hours. His stomach rumbled loudly. He had not eaten anything since lunch, and that had been just a small sandwich. All he wanted was a simple burger and fries before heading home. He stepped out of his car and walked toward the glass doors. Through the windows, he could see employees moving around inside. Some were wiping down tables. Others were working behind the counter. The restaurant was not busy. Only 2 customers sat at tables near the window finishing their meals. Marcus pushed open the door. A bell chimed above his head. The smell of fried food filled his nose. It made his stomach growl even louder. He walked up to the counter and waited. Nobody came to help him right away. Behind the counter, a tall man with short brown hair was talking to another employee. He wore a name tag that said Brad, Shift Manager. Brad was laughing loudly at something. He glanced over at Marcus and his smile disappeared immediately. His face changed to show clear annoyance. "Are you serious right now?" Brad said loudly to the other employee. He did not bother to lower his voice. "Another last-minute customer. I swear people have no consideration." Marcus stood quietly at the counter. He could hear every word Brad was saying. The other employee, a young woman with her hair tied back, looked uncomfortable. She glanced at Marcus with an apologetic expression but said nothing. Brad continued complaining. "We're trying to close up here. Why do people always come in right before we shut down?" He shook his head and muttered something else under his breath. Marcus waited patiently. He kept his expression neutral and calm. This was not the first time he had experienced poor customer service. But something about Brad's attitude bothered him more than usual. It was the complete lack of care or professionalism. Finally, Brad walked over to the counter. He did not smile. He did not greet Marcus. He just stood there with his arms crossed, staring at Marcus with obvious irritation. "Yeah?" Brad said. It was not really a question. It sounded more like a challenge. "Hello," Marcus said politely. "I would like to order, please." "Can I get a—" "Kitchen's closed." Brad interrupted him before he could finish. "You need to come back tomorrow." Marcus blinked. He looked at Brad carefully. "I'm sorry, but I thought the restaurant closes at 9. It's only 8:45 right now." He kept his voice calm and respectful. Brad let out a loud sigh. "Look, man, we're cleaning up. The grills are already being shut down. You should have come earlier if you wanted food." Marcus glanced at the menu board behind Brad. All the lights were still on. Through the window to the kitchen, he could see the grills were definitely still on. Steam was rising from one of them. An employee was cooking something on it right at that moment. "I can see the kitchen is still operating," Marcus said gently. He pointed toward the window. "And your posted hours on the door say you close at 9 o'clock. "I have 15 minutes. Brad's face turned red. His jaw clenched. "I just told you we're closed. We're cleaning. We have to do cleanup before we leave, and we're not staying late just because you showed up at the last minute." Marcus noticed that Brad's voice was getting louder. Other employees were stopping what they were doing to watch. The 2 customers eating at the tables were also looking over with curious expressions. "I understand you need time to clean," Marcus said, still maintaining his calm tone. "But I'm here during your business hours. I would just like to order something simple. A burger and fries would be fine." Brad laughed, but it was not a friendly laugh. It was mocking. "Dude, are you not getting this?" I said, "No, we're not serving you. The kitchen is closed." He emphasized each word like Marcus was having trouble understanding basic English. Marcus felt his jaw tighten slightly, but he kept his composure. He looked at Brad's name tag again, making sure to remember the name. Then his eyes traveled around the counter area. He noticed several things that made him pause. There were containers of food sitting out on the counter with no lids covering them. Flies could easily land on them. Next to the cash register, an employee had left their gloves sitting on the counter right next to where customers placed their money. Behind Brad, Marcus could see into the kitchen through the service window. The counters looked dirty. There were spills that had not been wiped up. One employee was handling food without wearing any gloves at all. Marcus's trained eye caught all of these details in just a few seconds. He had learned to notice such things quickly. It was part of his job, though nobody in this restaurant knew that yet. "So you're refusing to serve me even though you're still open?" Marcus asked one more time. He wanted to be absolutely clear about what was happening. "That's exactly what I'm saying," Brad said. He waved his hand dismissively at Marcus. "Now I've got work to do. Have a nice night." With that, Brad turned his back on Marcus and walked away, heading toward the kitchen area. Marcus stood at the counter for a moment longer. The young female employee approached hesitantly. "I'm sorry," she whispered quietly so Brad would not hear. "He's been like this all week." Marcus gave her a small nod. "It's not your fault," he said kindly. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she replied, still speaking softly. "Thank you, Sophia," Marcus said. "You have a good evening." He turned and walked toward the door. As he pushed it open, he heard Brad's voice behind him, loud and obnoxious. "Yeah, that's right. Better luck tomorrow, buddy." Marcus stepped outside into the cool evening air. The door closed behind him with a soft thud. He walked slowly to his car, but he did not get in right away. Instead, he stood beside the driver's door and looked back at the restaurant. From outside, he could see through the large windows. Employees were moving around inside, but they were not rushing to close. They were still cooking. They were still serving food to the two customers who had been there before Marcus arrived. The kitchen was clearly still operational. Marcus pulled out his phone from his pocket. He opened the notes application and began typing quickly. He documented the exact time, 8:47 in the evening. He wrote down Brad's name from the name tag. He described the refusal of service despite being within business hours. He made notes about the visible health code violations he had spotted from the counter. Then Marcus walked around to the front of the building. He took several photos of the front door where the business hours were clearly posted. The sign said in large letters, "Open until 9 p.m. He took pictures from different angles to make sure the time and date stamp on his phone would be clear. He opened his email application and began composing a message. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. He was writing to his supervisor, Janet Park. In the email, he described everything that had just happened. He attached the photos he had taken. Marcus stood in the parking lot for a few more minutes, observing the restaurant from outside. He watched employees through the windows. He saw Brad laughing with coworkers, probably bragging about turning away a customer. He saw Sophia looking worried as she wiped down a counter. Finally, Marcus got into his car. He sat in the driver's seat and pulled out a folder from his briefcase in the passenger seat. The folder was thick with papers. On the front, it was labeled Burger Crown, Complaint Investigation. He opened the folder and reviewed the contents. There were multiple complaint forms from customers. There were reports of food poisoning. There were complaints about rude service, especially during evening shifts. There were concerns about cleanliness and food safety. Marcus had been assigned to investigate this particular Burger Crown location for the past 2 weeks. He worked as a health inspector for the state's Department of Public Health. Going undercover was not his usual method, but this location had received so many complaints that his supervisor wanted him to experience it firsthand as a regular customer before conducting an official inspection. Now Marcus had experienced it personally, and it was worse than he had expected. He started his car engine and drove out of the parking lot. But this was not over, not by a long shot. Tomorrow he would return to Burger Crown. But next time he would not be just another customer that Brad could dismiss and mock. Next time, he would be there in his official capacity. And Brad had no idea what was coming. Marcus drove through the quiet streets toward his apartment. His mind kept replaying the scene at Burger Crown, the dismissive wave of Brad's hand, the mocking tone in his voice, the complete lack of respect. But what bothered Marcus most were the health violations he had spotted. Those were not just rudeness. Those could make people sick. When Marcus was 20 years old, he had worked at a small restaurant near his college campus. It was his first real job. He needed the money to help pay for his classes. The restaurant was busy every night, packed with students looking for cheap food after studying. Marcus had started as a dishwasher. He worked hard and learned quickly. After 3 months, the manager promoted him to prep cook. Marcus was proud of this promotion. He took the job seriously. He always washed his hands. He kept his work area clean. He followed every food safety rule he had been taught. But the night manager, a man named Rick, did not care about rules. Rick would leave meat sitting out at room temperature for hours. He would use the same cutting board for raw chicken and vegetables without washing it. When Marcus pointed out these problems, Rick laughed at him. "Nobody's going to die from a little bacteria," Rick had said. "We've been doing it this way for years. Stop being paranoid." Marcus tried to talk to the owner, but the owner lived in another city. He rarely visited the restaurant. He only cared about profits, not about how the kitchen was run. Then one night, everything changed. A customer got severely sick after eating at the restaurant. She was a college student like Marcus. Her name was Jennifer. She ordered chicken pasta, one of the restaurant's most popular dishes. Within hours of eating, she became violently ill. Her roommate found her unconscious in their dorm room and called an ambulance. Jennifer spent 4 days in the hospital. She had food poisoning from salmonella bacteria. The doctors said it was one of the worst cases they had seen. She almost died. The health department investigated the restaurant. They found multiple serious violations. The restaurant was shut down immediately. Rick was fired. The owner had to pay huge fines, but none of that helped Jennifer, who missed weeks of school and had medical bills she could not afford. Marcus visited Jennifer in the hospital. He felt terrible. He had known the kitchen was not safe. He had tried to say something, but he had not pushed hard enough. He blamed himself for not doing more. That experience changed Marcus's life path completely. He finished college and then enrolled in training to become a health inspector. He wanted to prevent what happened to Jennifer from happening to other people. He wanted to make sure restaurants followed safety rules. He wanted to protect the public. Now, 10 years later, Marcus was one of the best health inspectors in the state. He was thorough. He was fair. He did not look for reasons to shut down restaurants. He wanted them to succeed, but he also did not tolerate dangerous practices that put people at risk. Marcus pulled into his apartment complex parking lot. He grabbed his briefcase and went inside. His apartment was small but comfortable. He lived alone. The walls were decorated with a few family photos and some certificates from his training courses. He dropped his briefcase on the kitchen table and opened his laptop. He needed to send a full report to his supervisor. Marcus began typing out everything that had happened at Burger Crown. He included every detail. The refusal of service, the uncovered food containers, the employees without gloves, the dirty kitchen surfaces visible from the counter. When he finished the report, he attached it to an email along with the photos from his phone. He addressed it to Janet Park, his supervisor. Janet had been working as a health inspector for 25 years. She was tough but fair. She had taught Marcus most of what he knew about the job. Marcus clicked send and waited. Janet usually checked her email even in the evening. Within 5 minutes, his phone rang. It was Janet. "I just read your report," Janet said without saying hello first. Her voice was serious. "This matches what we've been hearing in the complaints." "It's worse than the complaints suggested," Marcus replied. He walked to his refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. Brad Stevens, the shift manager, was openly hostile. But the health violations I saw were concerning. And those were just what I could see from the customer area. I'm worried about what we'll find in a full inspection. "The complaints we received mentioned 3 cases of food poisoning in the last month," Janet said. Marcus could hear her shuffling through papers on her end of the phone. All 3 people ate at that location during evening shifts. All 3 got sick within 12 hours. Marcus sat down at his kitchen table. Sophia, one of the employees, seemed uncomfortable with how Brad was running things. "I think she knows there are problems but is afraid to speak up." "That's common," Janet said with a sigh. "Employees fear losing their jobs if they report violations. That's why we do these investigations. Someone has to hold these places accountable." "What's the next step?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Full official inspection tomorrow evening," Janet said firmly. "I want you to go during Brad's shift. Don't give them advance notice. That's our right under state health codes. Unannounced inspections are legal and necessary." "Understood," Marcus said. "I'll prepare the documentation tonight and be there tomorrow at 7:30. "Take someone with you," Janet added. "This might be a big one. I'll send Yoon Minho to assist. He's good with documentation." After hanging up with Janet, Marcus spent the next hour reviewing the complaint file on his laptop. The file was thick with reports. He read through each one carefully. The first complaint had come in 6 weeks ago. A customer named David Chen had eaten a burger at Burger Crown on a Tuesday evening. By midnight, he was vomiting. He went to the emergency room the next morning. The hospital confirmed food poisoning. David filed a complaint with the health department, specifically mentioning that the evening shift manager had seemed careless about food handling. 2 weeks later, another complaint arrived. A woman named Patricia Lee had ordered chicken nuggets and fries. She got sick within hours. Her complaint mentioned that the restaurant looked dirty and that employees were not wearing gloves. The most recent complaint was from just 10 days ago. A man named Jamal Williams had eaten at Burger Crown with his 7-year-old daughter. Both of them got food poisoning. His daughter had to be hospitalized overnight. Jamal's complaint was angry and detailed. He described seeing employees touch food with bare hands. He mentioned that the dining area smelled bad like old grease. He demanded action. Marcus leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. 3 confirmed cases of food poisoning in 1 month from one location. That was not normal. That was a serious pattern. Something was very wrong at this Burger Crown. He opened a new browser window and searched for online reviews of the restaurant. There were hundreds of reviews spanning several years. Marcus sorted them to show the most recent ones first. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Older reviews from a year ago were mostly positive. People praised the food quality. They said the service was quick and friendly. The restaurant had an average rating of 4 stars. But recent reviews from the last 3 months painted a very different picture. The average rating had dropped to 2 stars. Customer after customer complained about the evening shift. They mentioned rude service. They described being turned away before closing time. Several people said the restaurant looked dirty. A few mentioned getting sick after eating there. One review from 2 weeks ago caught Marcus's attention. It was written by a user named Sarah M. 2024. She wrote, "Avoid the evening shift at all costs. The manager is incredibly rude and dismissive. I ordered food at 8:30 p.m. and was told they were too busy cleaning to serve me, even though they close at 9 p.m. When I complained, he was aggressive and told me to leave. I'll never go back." Another review from a month ago said, "Got food poisoning after eating here on a Thursday night. Spent 2 days sick in bed. When I called to complain, the evening manager laughed and hung up on me." Reporting this to health department, Marcus made screenshots of the most relevant reviews. These would be useful evidence to show a pattern of problems. He checked the restaurant's corporate website. Burger Crown was a chain with locations across the state. The corporate headquarters was located in the capital city about 2 hours away. Marcus made a note of the corporate contact information. They would need to be notified about the inspection results. Next, Marcus reviewed the health code regulations that would apply to tomorrow's inspection. He had the codes memorized, but he wanted to be absolutely sure he documented everything correctly. When inspectors found violations, restaurant owners sometimes challenged the findings. Marcus needed his inspection to be perfect and unquestionable. He created a checklist on his laptop. Temperature controls for food storage, proper hand-washing facilities, employee hygiene practices, cross-contamination prevention, pest control measures, equipment maintenance, cleaning procedures, waste disposal. Each category had multiple specific items to check. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Yoon Minho, the inspector who would assist him tomorrow. "Janet told me about the inspection. I'll meet you at the office at 6 p.m. to go over documentation. This sounds like a serious case." Marcus texted back, "Thanks. See you then. Bring the full inspection kit. We'll need everything." He stood up and stretched. It was getting late. He needed to sleep. Tomorrow would be a long day. But as he got ready for bed, Marcus felt a sense of purpose. This was why he had become a health inspector. Not for revenge against rude managers, not to punish restaurants, but to protect people like Jennifer, the college student who had almost died from food poisoning when he was young. To protect children, like Jamal's 7-year-old daughter who had been hospitalized. Brad Stevens had no idea what was coming. He thought he had successfully turned away an annoying last-minute customer. He thought he had won. He had bragged to his coworkers about it. He probably went home that night feeling proud of himself. But Brad had made a critical mistake. He had revealed his true attitude toward customers and toward food safety. He had shown that he cut corners. He prioritized leaving work early over serving customers during business hours. And if he was willing to do that, what else was he willing to cut corners on? What other rules was he ignoring? Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about all the people who had gotten sick. He thought about all the customers who had been treated rudely and disrespectfully. He thought about Sophia, the young employee who looked scared and uncomfortable working under Brad's management. Tomorrow, everything would change at that Burger Crown location. Brad's carelessness and arrogance were about to catch up with him. The health inspection would reveal the truth. And if Marcus found the violations he suspected were there, Brad would have no one to blame but himself. Marcus finally closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. His last thought before sleeping was simple but determined. Tomorrow, justice would be served. Not personal revenge, not anger, just professional accountability and protection of public health. That was what mattered. That was what his job was all about. Marcus woke up early the next morning. Sunlight was streaming through his bedroom window. He checked his phone. It was 6:30. He had an entire day to prepare before the evening inspection at Burger Crown. He got out of bed and went through his morning routine. After showering and getting dressed, he made himself a simple breakfast of eggs and toast. As he ate, he reviewed his notes from the previous night on his tablet. Everything needed to be fresh in his mind. At 8 o'clock, Marcus drove to the regional office of the Department of Public Health. The building was a plain gray structure in the downtown area. It was not fancy, but it was functional. This was where all the health inspectors in the region worked. Marcus took the elevator to the 3rd floor and walked down the familiar hallway to his office. The walls were covered with public health posters and charts. Other inspectors were already at their desks, typing reports or making phone calls. Janet Park's office was at the end of the hall. Her door was open, which meant she was available. Marcus knocked on the door frame. "Come in," Janet said without looking up from her computer. She was a woman in her early 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been Marcus's mentor since his first day on the job. Marcus entered and sat down in the chair across from her desk. Janet finished typing something, then turned to face him. "I reviewed your report 3 more times last night," Janet said, getting straight to business. "The pattern of complaints combined with what you witnessed yesterday gives us strong cause for a comprehensive inspection." "I agree," Marcus replied. "I'm concerned about what we'll find in the kitchen and storage areas. The violations visible from the customer counter were bad enough." Janet pulled out a thick file folder and placed it on the desk between them. "I want this inspection to be thorough and completely by the book. No shortcuts. Document everything with photos. Take temperature readings of all food storage. Check every corner of that kitchen." "Understood," Marcus said. "Minho is meeting me here at 6 to go over the documentation checklist." "Good," Janet nodded. "Remember, health inspectors have the legal right to conduct unannounced inspections. You don't need permission. You don't need advance notice. You identify yourself, show your credentials, and begin the inspection. If anyone tries to delay you or deny entry, that's a violation in itself." Marcus had heard this many times before, but Janet always repeated the important points. It was one of the things that made her a good supervisor. She never assumed people remembered everything. "What about the corporate office?" Marcus asked. "Should we notify them before or after the inspection?" "After," Janet said firmly. "We notify corporate once the inspection is complete and we have our findings. That's standard procedure. If the violations are serious enough to require closure, we'll inform corporate at the same time we post the closure notice." Marcus nodded. He had expected this answer. Corporate offices sometimes tried to interfere with inspections if they received advance warning. They would send their own people to prepare the location, which really meant hiding problems. "One more thing," Janet said, leaning forward. "I know this manager was rude to you personally yesterday, but this inspection cannot be about revenge or payback. It has to be purely professional. You document the violations you find based on health codes, not based on how you were treated." "I understand," Marcus said seriously. "This is about public safety, not personal feelings. If the restaurant is clean and following all codes, I'll document that too, regardless of how Brad treated me." Janet studied his face for a moment, then seemed satisfied. "I know you will. That's why you're one of my best inspectors. You're fair." Marcus spent the rest of the morning preparing his inspection kit. He gathered his clipboard with blank inspection forms. He checked his digital thermometer to make sure it was properly calibrated. He packed his camera, making sure the battery was fully charged. He included testing supplies for checking sanitizer concentration. He brought extra pens, evidence bags, and a tape measure. While Marcus was preparing at the regional office, the morning shift was starting at Burger Crown. The morning manager, a kind woman named Linda Park, arrived at 6 to open the restaurant. Linda had worked at this location for 5 years. She was reliable and professional. Customers loved her. Linda went through her opening routine, checking everything. She noticed immediately that the kitchen was dirtier than it should be. The evening shift was supposed to do thorough cleaning before leaving, but it was clear they had not done it properly. The floors were sticky. The prep counters had dried food stuck to them. The trash cans were overflowing. Linda sighed and called over the morning staff. "We need to deep clean before we open," she told them. "The evening shift left us a mess again." The morning employees groaned but got to work. They knew it was not Linda's fault. This happened several times a week. The evening shift under Brad's management consistently did poor cleaning. As Linda supervised the cleaning, she made a mental note to talk to the district manager again. She had complained about Brad's management 3 times already. Each time the district manager had said he would look into it, but nothing ever changed. Brad was still the evening shift manager. The problems continued. Meanwhile, Brad Stevens was at home, sleeping in after his evening shift. He woke up around 10 in the morning feeling pleased with himself. He thought about the customer he had turned away last night. Brad had told his girlfriend about it over dinner. He had made it sound funny, like the customer was being unreasonable. "Guy shows up 15 minutes before closing and expects us to serve him," Brad had said, laughing. "I told him the kitchen was closed. You should have seen his face. He tried to argue with me, but I shut that down fast." His girlfriend had laughed, too, though she seemed a bit uncomfortable with the story. "Aren't you supposed to serve people until closing time?" she had asked. "That's what the sign says," Brad had replied with a shrug. "But in reality, we need time to clean up. I'm not staying late just because some random dude didn't plan his dinner better." Now, in the morning light, Brad got up and made himself breakfast. He did not think about the restaurant at all. He played video games for a few hours. Around 2 in the afternoon, he started getting ready for his evening shift, which began at 4. Back at Burger Crown, the lunch rush was ending. Linda had managed to get the kitchen clean and properly organized. The morning shift had been busy but successful. Customers were served quickly and politely. The food was fresh and properly prepared. This was how the restaurant was supposed to run. At 3:30, Linda's shift was ending. She gathered her belongings and got ready to leave. She left detailed notes for Brad about supply deliveries and a few maintenance issues that needed attention. She always left notes. Brad rarely read them. Brad arrived at exactly 4 o'clock. He walked in through the back door and went straight to the small office to clock in. He barely greeted Linda as she was leaving. "I left you notes about the cooler." "Temperature," Linda called out as she headed for the door. "It's reading a bit high, you should check it." "Yeah, okay," Brad said dismissively, not even looking at the notes. Linda frowned but left. She had learned that arguing with Brad was useless. He never listened. He always did things his own way. Brad's evening crew started arriving. There was Sofia Martinez, who had been there the night before when Brad turned away Marcus. There was Miguel Santos, a 17-year-old high school student working his first job. There was Kenji Tanaka, a college student who worked part-time to pay for books. And there was Emma Brown, who had only been working at Burger Crown for 2 weeks. Sophia clocked in and immediately went to check the walk-in cooler. She remembered Linda's note even if Brad had ignored it. Sophia opened the heavy cooler door and looked at the thermometer mounted on the wall. Her heart sank. The temperature read 45 degrees Fahrenheit. It should be at or below 40 degrees. Sophia went to find Brad. He was in the office scrolling through his phone. "Brad, the cooler temperature is too high. It's at 45 degrees. Brad barely looked up. "So adjust it." "I did adjust it yesterday," Sophia said, trying to keep her voice calm. "It keeps going back up. I think there's something wrong with the cooler. We might need to call maintenance." Brad sighed loudly, like Sophia was bothering him with something trivial. "It's fine. It's only 5 degrees off. Not a big deal. But the food safety guidelines say, Sophia started. I know what the guidelines say, Brad interrupted. I've been doing this job for 3 years. The food is fine. Just turn the temperature down again and stop worrying so much. Sophia wanted to argue more, but she knew it would not help. Brad never listened to her suggestions about safety. She went back to the cooler and adjusted the temperature setting, hoping it would stay down this time. But she made a mental note in her personal notebook. She had been keeping track of these issues for weeks. She wrote down the date, time, and the temperature reading. The evening shift began. The restaurant got busier as dinner time approached. Cars filled the parking lot. Customers lined up at the counter. The kitchen staff worked quickly to keep up with orders. At 6 o'clock, Marcus and Minho met at the regional office as planned. Minho was a younger inspector, only 28 years old, but he was excellent at documentation. He never missed details. He could take perfect photos that clearly showed violations without any confusion. I read the file on this place, Minho said as they prepared their inspection kits. 3 food poisoning cases in 1 month is serious, plus all those customer complaints about evening shift management. That's why we're being thorough tonight, Marcus replied. I have a feeling we're going to find significant violations. They loaded their equipment into Marcus's car and drove to Burger Crown. The drive took 20 minutes. Marcus parked in the lot at 7:20, 10 minutes before they planned to begin the inspection. They sat in the car observing the restaurant from outside. Through the large windows, they could see the restaurant was busy. Employees were rushing around. Customers were eating at tables. The drive-through lane had several cars waiting. Everything looked normal from the outside. Ready? Minho asked, checking his camera one more time. Ready, Marcus confirmed. He looked at his watch. 7:30 exactly. Let's go. They got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. Marcus carried his clipboard and credentials. Minho had the camera and equipment bag. They pushed open the glass doors and entered the restaurant. The bell chimed above their heads. Several customers glanced over at them, then returned to their meals. Marcus walked straight to the counter. A young employee named Kenji was taking orders. He looked up with a friendly smile. Welcome to Burger Crown, what can I... Kenji started to say. I need to speak with the manager immediately, Marcus said, not unkindly, but firmly. He pulled out his credentials and held them up. I'm Marcus Kim with the State Health Department. This is Inspector Yoon Minho. We're here to conduct a health inspection. Kenji's eyes went wide. The color drained from his face. Okay, let me get Brad. Kenji hurried away from the counter and rushed toward the back. Marcus and Minho waited patiently. They could hear Kenji's voice calling out, Brad! Brad, health inspectors are here. There was a moment of silence. Then they heard rapid footsteps. Brad appeared from the back area. He was walking quickly, trying to look casual, but his face showed clear nervousness. When he got close enough to see Marcus's face, he stopped suddenly. Recognition flashed in his eyes. It was the customer from last night. The man Brad had turned away and mocked. But now he was here in an official capacity. Brad's face went from nervous to pale in an instant. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Marcus looked at Brad calmly and professionally. I'm Marcus Kim, health inspector with the State Department. This is Inspector Yoon Minho. We're here to conduct a health inspection of this facility. Please gather your management team, Brad stammered. Can you give me a few minutes? I need to... No preparation time is permitted for health inspections, Marcus said firmly but politely. This is an unannounced inspection as allowed by state law. We begin immediately. Brad's face had gone completely white. He looked like he might be sick. His hands were shaking slightly. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Finally, he managed to say, This is about last night, isn't it? You're doing this because this inspection is about public health and safety. Marcus interrupted calmly. It has nothing to do with personal matters. Now please call your management team together. We're beginning the inspection now. Brad stood frozen for several seconds. His mind was clearly racing. Finally, he managed to speak again. Okay, I'll call everyone together. His voice was shaky. He turned and called out toward the kitchen. Sophia, Miguel, everyone, come to the front. The employees emerged from various areas of the restaurant. Sophia arrived first, wiping her hands on a towel. When she saw Marcus, her eyes showed recognition. She remembered him from the night before. But unlike Brad, she did not look scared. She looked almost relieved. Marcus addressed the group of employees professionally. "I'm Marcus Kim, and this is Inspector Minho. We're conducting a health and safety inspection of this location. We need access to all areas of the restaurant, including the kitchen, storage areas, and office. Please continue your work as normally as possible. We'll need to ask questions as we proceed." The employees nodded nervously. Brad tried to regain some composure. "Should I call the district manager?" he asked. His voice was still shaky. "You may inform anyone you need to," Marcus replied. "But the inspection begins now. We cannot wait for other personnel to arrive." Minho was already setting up his equipment. He took out the camera and clipboard. Marcus pulled out his digital thermometer and put on disposable gloves. They were ready to begin the thorough examination of Burger Crown. "We'll start with the kitchen and food storage areas," Marcus announced. He looked at Brad. "Lead the way." Brad nodded weakly and walked toward the kitchen entrance. His steps were slow, like he was walking toward his own execution. Sophia followed close behind, along with Marcus and Minho. The other employees remained in the front area, continuing to serve customers but watching nervously. As soon as they entered the kitchen, Marcus began his systematic inspection. His trained eyes scanned every surface, every corner, every piece of equipment. Minho followed with the camera, documenting everything. "Let's start with food storage temperatures," Marcus said. He walked toward the walk-in cooler. The large metal door had a temperature gauge on the outside, but Marcus knew these were not always accurate. He pulled the heavy door open. Cold air rushed out. Marcus stepped inside the cooler with his digital thermometer. He checked the built-in thermometer first. It read 40 degrees exactly. But when Marcus held up his calibrated digital thermometer, it showed a different reading, 46 degrees. "The thermometer on your cooler is not accurate," Marcus said. He showed the reading to Brad and Sophia. "The actual temperature in here is 46 degrees. The safe temperature for refrigerated food storage is 40 degrees or below." Brad started to speak. "It was working fine earlier. This is not about earlier," Marcus said calmly but firmly. "This is about the current condition. The temperature is currently unsafe." He nodded to Minho, who was already taking photos of both thermometers showing different readings. Marcus began checking individual food items inside the cooler. He used his thermometer to take the internal temperature of various products. The results were concerning. Ground beef that should be stored at 35 degrees was at 44 degrees. Chicken breasts were at 43 degrees. Pre-made salad mix was at 45 degrees. "How long have these food items been at this temperature?" Marcus asked. Sophia spoke up before Brad could answer. "The cooler has been having problems for 2 days. I reported it to Brad yesterday. I adjusted the temperature setting, but it keeps rising back up." Brad shot Sophia an angry look, but she did not back down. She stood straight and met his gaze. Marcus noticed this interaction and made a note. "Food cannot be stored at unsafe temperatures," Marcus said. He was documenting everything on his clipboard. "This is a critical violation." He turned to Minho. "Document all food items, their temperatures, and their storage positions." Minho began photographing systematically. He took wide shots showing the overall cooler organization, then close-up shots of the temperature readings, then individual photos of each food container. As Marcus examined the cooler more carefully, he discovered another serious problem. On one of the upper shelves there were packages of raw chicken. Directly below them on a lower shelf were containers of ready-to-eat salad. A small amount of liquid had dripped from the chicken package onto the salad containers below. "This is cross-contamination," Marcus said, pointing to the setup. "Raw meat must never be stored above ready-to-eat foods. Dripping from raw meat can contaminate safe foods with dangerous bacteria." Brad started to make an excuse. "That must have been placed wrong when—" "It doesn't matter when it was placed wrong," Marcus interrupted. "It's wrong now and it's dangerous. This could cause serious illness." He looked at Sophia. "When did you last check the storage organization in here?" "I checked this morning when I arrived," Sophia said. The chicken was properly stored on the bottom shelf. Someone must have reorganized things during the dinner rush and put it in the wrong place. Marcus nodded and made notes. "Who reorganized the storage?" Sophia hesitated. She glanced at Brad. Nobody wanted to answer. Finally, Miguel, the young high school student, spoke up quietly from the kitchen doorway. "Brad moved things around about an hour ago. He said we needed more room for the salad containers, so he moved the chicken up to make space. Brad's face turned red. I was trying to be efficient. We were busy. I didn't think. Food safety cannot be compromised for efficiency, Marcus said. His voice was not angry, just matter of fact. You're the shift manager. You should know proper storage procedures. They moved on from the cooler to the freezer. Marcus checked the temperature there as well. The freezer was fine, maintaining 0 degrees as required. But as he examined the frozen items, he noticed something else. Several packages of frozen meat showed clear signs of thawing and refreezing. The meat had ice crystals formed in unusual patterns, and the packaging had freezer burn. Have you had power outages recently? Marcus asked. No, Sophia answered. But the freezer door was left open for about 20 minutes last week. Brad was moving stock and forgot to close it completely. Brad glared at Sophia again. You don't need to tell them every little thing, he snapped at her. Sophia crossed her arms and looked at Marcus. I've been keeping notes about safety issues for weeks. I have dates and details. Would that be helpful for your inspection? Marcus was impressed by Sophia's courage. Yes, that would be very helpful. Please get your notes. Sophia nodded and left to retrieve her notebook. Brad looked furious, but he could not say anything with the inspectors present. Marcus moved on to inspect the food preparation areas. The counters were dirty. There were dried food particles stuck to the surfaces. The cutting boards showed deep cut marks where bacteria could hide. One cutting board had visible stains that suggested it had been used for raw meat, and then not properly sanitized. These prep surfaces are not being properly cleaned or sanitized, Marcus said. Mino photographed the dirty counters and stained cutting boards. Marcus then observed the hand-washing sink. It was tucked in a corner near the prep area, but when he walked over to it, he found the sink was blocked. 3 large cardboard boxes were stacked directly in front of it, making it impossible to reach without moving them. The hand-washing sink must be accessible at all times, Marcus said. Having it blocked is a serious violation. How can employees wash their hands properly if they cannot reach the sink? Those boxes just got delivered today, Brad said quickly. We haven't had time to put them away yet. Marcus looked at the boxes more carefully. They were not sealed. They had clearly been there for more than a few hours. Dust had settled on the top box. How long have these actually been here? He asked. There was silence. Then Kenji spoke up from the doorway. Those boxes have been there since Monday. That's 3 days ago. Brad looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. His face was bright red. Sweat was forming on his forehead. Marcus made detailed notes. For 3 days, employees have not had proper access to the hand-washing sink. This means they likely have not been washing their hands as frequently or as thoroughly as required. This is a critical violation that directly impacts food safety. Sophia returned with her notebook. It was a small spiral-bound notepad filled with her handwriting. She handed it to Marcus. I've been documenting problems for about 6 weeks, she explained. Every time I noticed something unsafe, I wrote it down. I was planning to report it, but I was scared of losing my job. Marcus took the notebook and began reading. His expression grew more serious with each page. Sophia had documented everything. Dates when the cooler temperature was too high. Times when Brad left food sitting out at room temperature. Instances when employees worked without gloves because Brad said they were too expensive to waste. Occasions when cleaning chemicals were stored next to food prep areas. One entry caught Marcus's attention. It was dated 2 weeks ago. Brad told Miguel to serve chicken nuggets that had been under the heat lamp for over 4 hours. Miguel said they looked dried out. Brad said to serve them anyway. Customer came back later complaining they tasted bad. Another entry from 10 days ago. Cooler broke completely. Brad waited 3 hours to call maintenance because he didn't want to bother them during dinner rush. Food temperature rose to 50 degrees. He served the food anyway instead of throwing it out. Marcus looked up at Sophia. This is extensive documentation. You were right to keep these notes. This information is very valuable. Brad suddenly exploded with anger. She's just trying to get me in trouble. She's always been against me since I became manager. This is a personal attack. Marcus turned to face Brad calmly. Sophia's notes are dated and detailed. They show a clear pattern of safety violations over many weeks. This is not a personal attack. This is evidence of systematic problems with how this kitchen is being managed. Brad opened his mouth to argue more, but Sophia spoke first. I'm not against you personally, Brad. I'm against serving unsafe food to customers. I'm against breaking rules that exist to keep people healthy. 3 people got food poisoning from this restaurant in the last month. 3 people. One of them was a little girl who had to go to the hospital. Brad had no response to that. He just stood there, his anger deflating into something that looked more like defeat. Marcus continued his inspection. He checked the pest control logs. They were supposed to show monthly visits from a licensed pest control company. But as Marcus reviewed the logbook, he noticed something strange. Every entry was in the same handwriting. The signatures were nearly identical. The date stamps looked suspicious. These logs appear to be falsified, Marcus said. When was your last actual pest control visit? There was uncomfortable silence. Finally, Emma, the newest employee, spoke up hesitantly. I've been working here for 2 weeks, and I've never seen anyone come for pest control. That's because we don't need it, Brad said quickly. We don't have any pest problems. The law requires regular pest control inspections regardless of whether you currently see pests, Marcus explained. The goal is prevention, and these logs are clearly not authentic. Marcus opened a lower cabinet under the sink. Inside, he found exactly what he feared, droppings that indicated rodent activity. He showed them to Minho, who immediately began documenting with photos. You do have a pest problem, Marcus said, and you've been hiding it instead of addressing it. Brad had run out of excuses. He just stood there silently, looking defeated. Marcus moved to the storage area where cleaning supplies were kept. His heart sank at what he found. Bottles of strong cleaning chemicals were stored on the same shelf as containers of cooking oil and spices. Some bottles were not properly closed. One bottle had leaked, and the chemical had dripped onto a container of flour below it. Cleaning chemicals must be stored completely separately from food items, Marcus said. This is basic food safety. Contamination from chemicals can cause serious poisoning. He picked up the container of flour that had chemical residue on it. This flour is contaminated and must be thrown away immediately. But how much of it was already used? How many customers may have eaten food made with contaminated flour? Nobody answered. Nobody knew. That was the terrible truth. Brad's careless management had created so many safety problems that there was no way to know how many customers had been put at risk. Marcus spent another hour documenting every violation he could find. By the time he finished the kitchen inspection, he had documented over 20 separate violations. Some were minor, like improper labeling, but many were critical violations that posed immediate risk to public health. The grease trap had not been properly maintained, creating a fire hazard. The floors were slippery with old grease. Equipment was not being properly cleaned between uses. Food items were not being dated when opened. Temperature logs were being filled out without actual measurements being taken. It was a complete failure of basic food safety management. And it all traced back to one person, Brad Stevens, the shift manager who cared more about leaving work on time than about keeping customers safe. After completing the kitchen inspection, Marcus needed to interview the employees individually. He wanted to understand the full scope of the problems at this location. He asked if there was a private space where he could speak with staff members one at a time. Brad reluctantly led him to the small office at the back of the restaurant. It was cramped and messy, with papers piled everywhere and a small desk with a computer. Marcus asked Minho to continue photographing and documenting the violations while he conducted interviews. I'd like to speak with Sophia first, Marcus said. Brad's jaw clenched, but he nodded and went to get her. Sophia entered the office and closed the door behind her. She looked nervous but determined. Marcus gestured for her to sit in the chair across from the desk. You're not in trouble, Marcus said gently. I want to be clear about that first. You've been documenting safety concerns, which shows you care about doing things right. I need to understand what's been happening here. Sophia relaxed slightly. Thank you. I've been really worried about the food safety here for a long time, but I didn't know what to do. I need this job. I have bills to pay. I was afraid if I reported the problems, Brad would fire me. That fear is completely understandable, Marcus said. Unfortunately, many employees face that same situation. That's why we do these inspections. Now, can you walk me through what's been happening? Start from the beginning. Sophia took a deep breath and began talking. I've worked here for almost a year. When I started, the evening manager was a woman named Rachel. She was great. She followed all the rules. The kitchen was always clean. She trained us properly. But she left about 4 months ago to take a better job somewhere else. And Brad took over after that? Marcus asked. Yes, Sophia nodded. At first he seemed okay, but pretty quickly things started changing. Brad was always in a hurry to finish his shift and go home. He would start closing procedures an hour before the actual closing time. He'd turn customers away early. He cut corners on cleaning to save time. Sophia pulled out her notebook and flipped through the pages. It started small. He'd tell us not to wash certain things thoroughly because it took too long. He'd say the health department never checked certain areas, so we didn't need to worry about them. He stored things wrong to save space. He ignored temperature problems because calling maintenance was inconvenient. And it got worse over time, Marcus prompted. Much worse, Sophia said. Her voice was filled with frustration. About 2 months ago, the walk-in cooler started having issues. The temperature would rise above safe levels. I told Brad immediately. He said he'd deal with it. But he never called maintenance. He just had us keep adjusting it manually. The problem never got fixed. She flipped to another page in her notebook. Then there was the time we ran out of gloves. Brad said they were too expensive and we were going through them too fast. He told us to only use gloves for raw meat, not for everything. But the rules say we should use gloves for all food handling, right? That's correct, Marcus confirmed. Gloves are required for handling all ready-to-eat foods. That's what I thought, Sophia said. But Brad insisted we were wasting them. Some of the other employees started handling food with bare hands because Brad told them to. I kept using gloves anyway, and Brad would make comments about me being wasteful and dramatic. Marcus was taking detailed notes as Sophia talked. Tell me about the food poisoning incidents. Did you know about those? Sophia's expression became pained. Yes, I knew about all 3. The first one was a man who ordered a burger. I remember that night clearly. The burger meat had been sitting out on the prep counter for a long time. I told Brad it had been out too long and we should throw it away. He said I was being paranoid. He had Miguel cook it and serve it anyway. The man came back 2 days later and complained that he'd gotten violently sick. Did Brad document that complaint? Marcus asked. No, Sophia shook her head. He told the man it must have been something else he ate. He refused to take any responsibility. He didn't report it to corporate or anyone. What about the second case? That was a woman who ordered chicken nuggets, Sophia said, checking her notes. The nuggets had been under the heat lamp for hours. They were dried out and looked bad. I suggested we make a fresh batch. Brad said no. We weren't wasting food just because it didn't look perfect. She got sick too. She called and yelled at Brad over the phone. He just hung up on her. Marcus's expression was grave. And the third case? Sophia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. That was the worst one. A father and his young daughter. It was about 10 days ago. They ordered a lot of food. The cooler had been broken for most of that day. Brad finally called maintenance, but not until late afternoon. By then, some of the food had been at unsafe temperatures for hours. Brad didn't throw any of it out. He said we couldn't afford to waste that much food. We served it anyway. She paused, her eyes watering slightly. The little girl got really sick. Her father called us the next day from the hospital. He was so angry, he said his daughter had to stay overnight. She was only 7 years old. Brad told him there was no way to prove it was our food that made her sick. He was so cold about it. That's when I started really documenting everything. I decided that if this happened again, I would report it no matter what happened to my job. Marcus felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice professional. You did the right thing by documenting everything. Your notes are going to be very important evidence. Do any of the other employees have concerns they've been afraid to voice? Everyone does, Sophia said. Miguel is scared to say anything because this is his first job and he doesn't want to get fired. Kenji has noticed problems but mostly stays quiet. Emma is too new to know what's normal and what isn't. But we've all talked about it among ourselves. We all know Brad is running things wrong. We just didn't know how to fix it without losing our jobs. What about the morning shift? Marcus asked. How does it compare? Linda, the morning manager, is wonderful, Sophia said, and her face brightened a little. She does everything by the book. The kitchen is clean during her shifts. Food is stored properly. Temperatures are monitored. She actually cares. I wish I could work morning shifts with her, but I'm in college classes in the morning, so I'm stuck on evenings with Brad. Marcus made a note to interview Linda as well. Has Linda been aware of the evening shift problems? She knows, Sophia nodded. She's complained to the district manager multiple times. Every morning when she comes in, she has to clean up the mess that Brad's shift left behind. She's tried to get something done about it, but nothing ever changes. I think the district manager doesn't want to deal with it. Tell me about last night, Marcus said. The incident where Brad turned away a customer. Sophia looked directly at Marcus. That was you, wasn't it? I recognized you when you came in today. Marcus nodded. Yes, that was me. I was here on an undercover visit following up on the complaints we'd received. What did you observe? Brad was in a bad mood all evening, Sophia explained. He kept complaining about wanting to leave early. When you came in at 8:45, I saw him look at the clock and then look at you. He made that face he always makes when he's annoyed. Then he started complaining loudly about last-minute customers. I felt so embarrassed. You were well within our business hours. You had every right to order food, she continued. When you tried to order, Brad just cut you off and said the kitchen was closed. But it wasn't closed. We were still cooking. We served 2 other customers after that. Brad just didn't want to serve you because he wanted to start closing early. After you left, he bragged about it to everyone. He thought it was funny. He had no idea you were a health inspector. Did he often turn away customers before closing time? Marcus asked. All the time, Sophia said. Maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Anyone who came in the last 15 or 20 minutes would usually get turned away. Brad would make excuses about the kitchen being closed or us being too busy cleaning. But really, he just wanted to leave on time or even early. He prioritized his own convenience over serving customers and following the rules. Marcus finished writing his notes from Sophia's interview. Is there anything else you think I should know? Sophia thought for a moment. Just that most of us who work here really do care about doing a good job. We're not all like Brad. Some of us want to follow the rules and serve safe food. But when your manager tells you to do things wrong and threatens your job if you don't listen, it's hard to know what to do. I hope this inspection makes things better. People could get really sick from the way things have been running. Thank you for your honesty and courage, Marcus said. You may have helped prevent more people from getting sick by keeping those notes and speaking up today. Sophia left the office and Marcus called in the other employees one by one. Miguel confirmed everything Sophia had said. He described how Brad pressured them to work faster at the expense of safety. He talked about being told to serve food that looked questionable. He mentioned being yelled at for wasting time when he tried to wash his hands properly between tasks. Kenji shared similar stories. He talked about Brad falsifying temperature logs without actually checking temperatures. He described being told to use the same cutting board for multiple types of food without washing it between uses. He mentioned that Brad would leave early sometimes, leaving the crew without proper supervision. Emma, the newest employee, had the least to share since she'd only been there 2 weeks. But even in that short time, she'd noticed problems. She described being inadequately trained. Brad had spent maybe 10 minutes showing her the basics, then left her to figure things out on her own. She'd made mistakes because she didn't know the proper procedures and nobody had properly taught her. After interviewing all the evening shift employees, Marcus had a complete picture. This was not just a few isolated problems. This was systematic failure of management and safety protocols under Brad's leadership. The problems were consistent, ongoing, and well documented. Marcus asked to speak with Brad next. When Brad entered the office, he looked defeated and angry at the same time. His face was red and his hands were clenched into fists. This is completely unfair, Brad said before Marcus could even begin. You're targeting me because of last night. This is revenge, pure and simple. I'm going to file a complaint about this biased inspection. Marcus remained calm. Mr. Stevens, this inspection is based on documented health code violations that I observed and photographed today. It has nothing to do with personal matters. The violations existed before last night, and they would have been discovered eventually through routine inspection. Sophia has been trying to undermine me since I became manager, Brad insisted. She's always questioning my decisions and making problems. Those notes of hers are exaggerated and biased. Her notes are dated and detailed, Marcus replied evenly. They match what other employees reported independently. They also correlate with the actual violations I found today during my physical inspection. The cooler temperature was objectively too high. The cross-contamination was real. The blocked hand-washing sink existed. These are facts, not opinions. Brad had no good response. He tried a different approach. Look, I've been under a lot of pressure. Corporate wants us to keep costs down. They want us to minimize food waste. They want us to control labor hours. I'm trying to balance all of that with running a shift. Food safety is not negotiable, Marcus said firmly. It doesn't matter what pressures you're under. You cannot serve unsafe food to customers. You cannot falsify safety logs. You cannot store food improperly. These are fundamental requirements, not optional guidelines. I never meant for anyone to get sick, Brad said, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely remorseful rather than defensive. I was just trying to be efficient. 3 people got food poisoning from this location under your management, Marcus said. 1 was a 7-year-old child who had to be hospitalized. Your efficiency put people's health at serious risk. That's unacceptable in food service. Brad slumped in his chair. He seemed to finally understand the seriousness of the situation. What happens now? I complete my inspection report, Marcus explained. Based on the number and severity of violations I've found, this restaurant will fail the inspection. The facility will be closed immediately until all violations are corrected. Corporate will be notified. They'll investigate and make decisions about personnel and remediation. I'm going to lose my job, Brad said quietly. It wasn't a question. That's not my decision, Marcus said. My job is to identify health and safety violations and ensure they're corrected. What corporate decides about employees is up to them. But yes, given the severity and systematic nature of these problems, there will likely be consequences. Brad nodded slowly. He looked at Marcus one more time. For what it's worth, I am sorry about last night. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I shouldn't have turned you away. I appreciate the apology, Marcus said, but understand that last night didn't create these problems. It just brought them to light. These violations existed because of choices you made over many months. Last night was simply the moment when someone with the authority to investigate finally saw them. Brad left the office without another word. Marcus sat alone for a moment, organizing his notes and thoughts. Then he went back out to join Minho, and together they completed the final documentation of the inspection. Marcus and Minho spent another hour completing their documentation. They had photographed every violation. They had measured temperatures. They had collected evidence. They had interviewed staff. Now it was time to compile everything into an official inspection report. Marcus sat at a table in the dining area with his laptop. The restaurant was still open, with confused customers watching the inspection process unfold. Some customers asked what was happening. Employees had to explain that a health inspection was taking place. Minho reviewed all the photos on his camera, organizing them by category. Marcus typed up the formal inspection report on a standardized form. Each violation was listed with its specific health code reference, description, photographic evidence, and severity rating. The final count was staggering. 23 separate violations. 8 of them were critical violations that posed immediate risk to public health. The remaining 15 were serious violations that needed correction within specific timeframes. Critical violations included improper food storage temperatures, cross-contamination between raw and ready-to-eat foods, blocked hand-washing facilities, contaminated food items still in use, falsified pest control and temperature logs, unsanitary food contact surfaces, and improper chemical storage near food. Marcus calculated the inspection score based on the standardized rating system. The restaurant scored 42 out of 100 possible points. Any score below 70 was a failing grade. A score below 50 triggered mandatory immediate closure until all critical violations were remediated and a follow-up inspection passed. Marcus stood up and approached Brad, who was standing near the counter looking miserable. Mr. Stevens, based on the violations found during this inspection, this establishment has failed health and safety standards. The score is 42 out of 100. I am required by law to close this facility immediately until all critical violations are corrected. Brad nodded weakly. He had known this was coming. How long will we be closed? That depends on how quickly the violations are corrected, Marcus explained. All food stored at improper temperatures must be discarded. The cooler must be repaired and verified at proper temperature. All equipment must be deep cleaned and sanitized. Pest control must be performed by a licensed company. Chemical storage must be corrected. Employees must complete food safety retraining. Once all corrections are made, you can request a follow-up inspection. If you pass that inspection, you can reopen. And if we can't fix everything quickly, Brad asked, then you stay closed until you can, Marcus said simply. Public health takes priority over business operations. Marcus walked to the front door of the restaurant. He carried a bright red notice printed on official government paper. The notice stated in large letters, "Closed by Health Department, do not enter." Below that, it listed the date of closure, the reason, and the contact information for the health department. Marcus taped the notice to the inside of the glass door, where it would be clearly visible from outside. Customers in the parking lot would see it immediately. Anyone trying to enter would know the restaurant was officially closed. "You need to stop serving customers immediately," Marcus told Brad. "Inform everyone currently in the restaurant that you're closing now. Anyone who already ordered should receive refunds. You cannot serve any more food until this closure notice is removed." Brad made an announcement to the confused customers and employees. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a health inspection, we are required to close immediately. We apologize for the inconvenience. Anyone who has already ordered will receive a full refund. We hope to reopen soon after making necessary corrections." Several customers looked alarmed. Some left quickly, not even waiting for refunds. Others approached the counter with questions. Brad and the employees had to explain over and over that they were being closed by the health department. While this was happening, Marcus made a phone call. He contacted the corporate office of Burger Crown. It was after 9 in the evening, but there was an emergency contact number for situations like this. A corporate representative answered. "This is Marcus Kim, health inspector for the State Department," Marcus explained. "I need to inform you that your location at 458 Market Street has been closed by the health department due to multiple critical violations. The facility received a failing inspection score of 42. A full report is being sent to your corporate office tonight." There was shocked silence on the other end of the phone. Then the corporate representative asked, "How serious are the violations?" "Very serious," Marcus said. "Multiple food safety failures, falsified safety logs, improper food storage, and several cases of confirmed food poisoning linked to this location. I recommend corporate send representatives immediately to assess the situation and coordinate remediation. We'll have someone there first thing in the morning," the representative promised. "Thank you for notifying us." Within 30 minutes, the restaurant was empty of customers. The employees stood around uncertainly, not sure what to do. Brad looked shell-shocked. Sophia looked worried, but also quietly relieved that someone had finally taken action. Marcus addressed the group of employees one final time. "You are not allowed to work in this facility while it is closed. You should contact your corporate office or district manager about your work schedules and pay during the closure period. The closure is not a reflection on you as individual employees. Many of you tried to do the right thing despite difficult circumstances." He looked specifically at Sophia. "Ms. Martinez, I want to personally thank you for your documentation and courage in speaking up. You may have prevented more people from getting seriously ill." Sophia nodded, her eyes watering slightly. "I just hope things get better." Marcus and Minho packed up their equipment and left the restaurant. They drove back to the regional office to file the official report. Even though it was late evening, Janet Park was still there, waiting for their return. "How bad was it?" Janet asked as soon as they entered her office. "Worse than I expected," Marcus said. He handed her the thick inspection report. 23 violations, 8 critical. Systematic failure of management and safety protocols. Confirmed connections to the 3 food poisoning cases. I had no choice but to close them immediately. Janet read through the report carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. She looked at the photos Minho had taken. She read the employee interview notes. Finally, she looked up at Marcus. "You did everything correctly," she said. "This is thorough, well documented, and by the book. Corporate is going to have a lot to answer for. How did they not know this was happening at one of their locations? Either they didn't know, which means they weren't supervising properly," Marcus said, "or they did know and ignored it. Either way, they have serious problems." The next morning, the story hit local news. A reporter had seen the closure notice on Burger Crown's door and contacted the health department for information. Janet provided a brief public statement confirming the closure and the general nature of the violations, without revealing specific details that could identify individual employees. The corporate office of Burger Crown sent a regional manager named Ms. Chen to the location. She arrived at 8 in the morning with a team of corporate inspectors and maintenance workers. She met with Janet and Marcus at the health department office first. "We are absolutely appalled at what happened," Ms. Chen said. She was a professional woman in her 40s who seemed genuinely upset. "This is not how Burger Crown operates. These violations are completely unacceptable. We are taking immediate action. What kind of action? Janet asked. Brad Stevens has been suspended without pay pending a full corporate investigation, Ms. Chen explained. We are interviewing all employees. We are reviewing security footage from the location. We are checking records from other locations where Mr. Stevens previously worked. We are bringing in professional cleaning crews and repair technicians to fix every violation on your list. What about the employees who tried to report problems? Marcus asked. I want to ensure they face no retaliation. We have strict policies against retaliation, Ms. Chen assured him. Sofia Martinez has been praised for her documentation and will be offered a promotion. The other employees will be given additional training and support. We are also investigating why the district manager did not respond appropriately to previous complaints from the morning manager. Over the next 10 days, the Burger Crown location underwent complete transformation. Corporate brought in commercial refrigeration experts who replaced the faulty walk-in cooler entirely. Professional cleaning crews deep cleaned every surface in the kitchen. New equipment was purchased to replace items that were too damaged or dirty to salvage. Every single food item in the facility was thrown out and replaced with fresh inventory. A licensed pest control company performed extensive treatment and set up ongoing monitoring. All employees, including managers from other locations, went through intensive food safety retraining. New procedures were implemented for daily temperature checks, cleaning schedules, and management oversight. Sofia was promoted to shift manager with a significant pay increase. She was given full authority to enforce food safety standards and report any concerns without fear of consequences. The district manager who had ignored previous complaints was demoted and required to complete additional training. Corporate also made changes at 3 other locations where Brad had previously worked. Inspections of those facilities revealed similar problems, though not as severe. Brad was officially terminated from the company. Corporate filed reports with state licensing boards to flag his management record. On the 10th day after the closure, Marcus returned to conduct the follow-up inspection. He arrived with Minho again, both carrying their inspection equipment. But this time, they were greeted by Sofia, who was now wearing a name tag that read Shift Manager. Welcome back, Sofia said with a genuine smile. We're ready for inspection. I think you'll find things very different now. Marcus and Minho conducted a thorough re-inspection. They checked every area that had previously violated codes. The improvements were dramatic and obvious. The new walk-in cooler maintained perfect temperature. Food was stored properly with raw items on bottom shelves and ready-to-eat foods on top shelves. Everything was labeled with dates. The temperature logs were being maintained accurately, with Sofia checking them herself twice per shift. The hand-washing sink was completely clear and accessible. Soap and paper towels were well stocked. Signs reminded employees about proper hand-washing procedures. Employees were using gloves appropriately for all food handling. The prep surfaces were spotlessly clean and properly sanitized. Cutting boards were color-coded for different types of food. The floors were clean and slip-free. The grease trap had been professionally serviced. Equipment was gleaming and properly maintained. Chemical storage was completely separate from food areas, with clear labeling and proper containment. Pest control documentation was genuine, with monthly service from a licensed company. All equipment was functioning properly and calibrated correctly. Marcus went through his entire inspection checklist. Every single violation from the previous inspection had been corrected. More than that, the restaurant now exceeded minimum standards. Sofia had implemented additional safety measures beyond what was required. After 3 hours of thorough inspection, Marcus compiled his report. The restaurant scored 94 out of 100. It was a passing grade with distinction. Congratulations, Marcus said to Sofia and Ms. Chen, who had stayed for the re-inspection. You have not only corrected all violations, but created a model food safety program. This facility can reopen immediately. Ms. Chen looked genuinely relieved. Thank you for your thorough work, Inspector Kim. I know this was a difficult situation, but it was necessary. We are committed to maintaining these standards permanently. Sofia looked proud and happy. Thank you for taking action. I know it was your job, but you probably saved people from getting sick, maybe even saved lives. Marcus removed the red closure notice from the door and replaced it with a passing inspection certificate. The restaurant was officially cleared to reopen. Sophia and her crew spent the rest of the day preparing for the reopening the next morning. 2 weeks after the reopening, Marcus decided to return to Burger Crown as a regular customer. He wanted to see how things were operating under normal conditions. He arrived at 8:30 in the evening, deliberately choosing a time close to closing. He walked up to the counter where Sophia was taking orders. She recognized him immediately and smiled warmly. "Welcome to Burger Crown," she said professionally. "What can I get for you this evening?" "I'd like a burger and fries, please," Marcus said. "Absolutely," Sophia replied. She took his order without any hesitation, even though closing time was only 30 minutes away. "Your order will be ready in about 5 minutes. Would you like to eat here or take it to go?" "I'll eat here, thank you," Marcus said. While Marcus waited for his food, he observed the restaurant. It was clean and well-maintained. Employees were working efficiently but safely. He could see through the kitchen window that proper procedures were being followed. Everyone was wearing gloves. Surfaces were clean. Food was being handled correctly. His order arrived quickly. The food was hot and fresh. Marcus sat at a table and ate his meal. It tasted good. More importantly, he knew it was safe. As Marcus was finishing his meal, Sophia came over to his table during a quiet moment. "How is everything?" she asked. "Excellent," Marcus said honestly. "Both the food and the operation. We take it seriously now," Sophia said. "Corporate has been checking on us regularly. But honestly, we would maintain these standards anyway. We've all learned how important it is. None of us want to see another customer get sick." "You're doing a great job as manager," Marcus told her. "This location is lucky to have you." Sophia smiled. "Thank you. And thank you again for what you did. I know it wasn't personal revenge, even though Brad tried to claim it was. You were just doing your job to protect people. That night when Brad turned you away, he had no idea he was revealing all his problems to exactly the wrong person." Marcus chuckled. "Or exactly the right person, depending on how you look at it. Sometimes these things work out the way they're supposed to." He finished his meal and threw away his trash. As he headed for the door, he noticed it was 8:55, just 5 minutes before closing time. But the staff were still ready to serve any customers who came in. They were still working efficiently. They would serve people properly until exactly 9 o'clock, just as they were supposed to. Marcus stepped outside into the cool evening air. He looked back at the restaurant through the large windows. Inside, Sophia was helping train a new employee, showing them proper hand-washing technique and explaining why each step was important. The young employee was listening carefully and asking good questions. Marcus got into his car and sat for a moment before starting the engine. He thought about the journey that had led to this moment, a rude dismissal that could have just been a frustrating experience. Instead, it had become an opportunity to fix serious problems and protect public health. He thought about Jennifer, the college student from his past who had almost died from food poisoning. He thought about the 7-year-old girl who had been hospitalized after eating at this Burger Crown. He thought about all the people who might have gotten sick if the violations had continued. This was why Marcus had become a health inspector. Not to punish people, not for revenge, but to protect the public, to make sure restaurants served safe food, to hold people accountable when they cut corners that put lives at risk. Brad had learned a hard lesson. His arrogance and carelessness had cost him his job and his reputation. But more importantly, they had put people's health at serious risk. The consequences he faced were not revenge. They were accountability. Sophia had learned that speaking up about safety concerns was the right thing to do, even when it was scary. Her courage had helped expose problems that needed fixing. Now she had been rewarded with a promotion and the chance to run things the right way. The restaurant had learned that food safety was not optional or negotiable. It was fundamental to their business. Corporate oversight and proper management were essential, and Marcus had been reminded once again why his job mattered. Every inspection he conducted, every violation he documented, every restaurant he helped improve. It all added up to protecting people's health and safety. He started his car and drove away from Burger Crown, satisfied with a job well done. The restaurant would continue operating under Sophia's ethical leadership. Customers would be served safely and respectfully. The problems had been fixed. Sometimes justice was served not through revenge but through accountability. Not through anger but through professional responsibility. Not through personal vendetta but through protecting the greater good. Marcus had done his job. The system had worked the way it was supposed to, and people were safer because of it. That was all that mattered in the end.